A shiny silver badge does not make a man a true hero, but losing it can completely break his soul. Elias stood in the rain, looking at the police station. He was once the absolute best K-9 officer in the city. His partner was Titan, a large, beautiful German shepherd. Elias and Titan were a perfect team. They understood each other without speaking. Last night, they caught a very dangerous drug smuggling gang. They saved many lives. Elias went home feeling proud. He thought he was making the world a better, safer place for everyone. But the world is full of dark secrets. The next morning, serious men in black suits walked into the police station. They were internal affairs officers. They walked straight to Elias's private locker. They used a heavy tool to break the metal lock and open the small door. Elias watched in total shock. Inside his locker, the officers found 2 heavy bags of stolen drug money. Elias had never seen those bags before. Someone had secretly put the dirty money there to destroy his entire life. The officers immediately put cold metal handcuffs on his wrists. The biggest shock was the man standing behind the officers. It was Jax. Jax was Elias's police partner and his best friend. Jax looked at Elias with a cold, fake smile. Jax was the anonymous person who called internal affairs. He had planned this terrible trap for many months. Jax wanted power and glory. He knew he could never be better than Elias, so he chose to eliminate him. The police chief took Elias's silver badge and his gun. But the worst pain was yet to come. Elias begged to take his dog, Titan, home with him. The police chief shook his head. Titan is official police property, the chief said coldly. Jax stepped forward and took Titan's heavy leather leash. Titan whined and tried to run to Elias, but Jax pulled the leash very hard. Elias watched his best friend being dragged away. The terrible plan worked perfectly. Because Elias was gone, Jax was immediately promoted to the rank of captain. Jax started using Titan as a shiny toy. He forced the sad dog to take pictures with newspapers and television reporters. Jax became the city's famous hero. Elias was thrown out into the cold streets. He had no job, no money, and no honor. He lost his brother and his best friend in a single day. The injustice burned a deep hole in his chest. But the quiet K-9 officer was not completely destroyed yet. Elias walked away from the noisy city. He needed a quiet place to heal his broken heart. He did not know that destiny was preparing a new, impossible mission for him. The true silent guardian was just going to sleep for a little while. Elias moved to a small, wooden cabin near the edge of a dark, foggy forest. He lived a very quiet, lonely life. He chopped wood and drank bitter coffee. But his house felt too empty. He missed the comforting sound of a dog walking on the wooden floor. One cold morning, Elias visited a local animal shelter. He walked past many noisy cages. At the very end of the dark hallway, he saw a warning sign. The sign said, "Extremely dangerous. Do not approach." Inside the cage was a thin Belgian Malinois named Max. Max was a former military dog. He had returned from a terrible war zone. The shelter manager warned Elias to stay away. "Max is a broken killing machine," the manager said. "He bites anyone who comes near. He is scheduled to be put to sleep tomorrow morning." Elias looked closely at the angry dog. Max was showing his sharp teeth and barking wildly. But Elias knew the secret language of dogs. He wanted to test a theory. Elias intentionally dropped his heavy metal car keys onto the hard concrete floor. It made a loud noise. The sudden, sharp crash echoed loudly. Max did not attack the cage. Instead, the dog instantly dropped to the floor. Max curled his thin body into a tight ball and started shaking violently. Max was not an aggressive killer. He was suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. The loud noise reminded Max of exploding bombs in the war. He was absolutely terrified of the world. Elias felt a deep, powerful connection. They were both broken soldiers abandoned by the system. Elias paid the fee and took the shaking dog back to his quiet cabin. That evening, a terrible summer storm hit the forest. Dark clouds covered the sky. A massive flash of lightning lit up the room. Then, a huge crash of thunder shook the wooden cabin. The loud explosion sounded exactly like a deadly bomb dropping from the sky. Max panicked completely. His military trauma took over his mind. He ran blindly across the living room. He crashed heavily into a glass coffee table, breaking it into sharp pieces. Max did not stop. He squeezed himself into a tiny, dark space under the wooden floorboards. Elias quickly grabbed a flashlight. He looked under the floor. Max was hiding in the dirt, shaking uncontrollably. The dog's paws were bleeding badly from the broken glass. He showed his teeth, ready to bite if Elias tried to pull him out. He trusted absolutely no one. Elias knew he could not force the dog out. Using force would only make the trauma much worse. Elias had to use a completely different method to save this broken soul. He had to use the silent, powerful magic of pure patience and deep understanding. Elias threw away his heavy leather leashes and metal collars. He knew that violence and force would never heal a broken mind. He needed to speak a very old, silent language. It was the natural language of wolves and dogs. It was called Paw Logic. Elias sat down on the floor near the dark hole. He did not look directly at Max staring as a threat in the animal world. Instead, Elias turned his back completely to the hiding dog. He sat perfectly still, showing that he was not a danger. Then Elias started using calming signals. These are small, natural movements dogs use to bring peace. Elias breathed very slowly and deeply. He opened his mouth and yawned a long, sleepy yawn. He licked his lips quietly. He blinked his eyes very slowly, like a sleepy child. Elias did this for 2 whole days. He slept on the hard floor near the hole. He did not use food to trick the dog. He only offered his calm, peaceful energy. The silent signals told Max's frightened brain that the house was a safe zone. On the 3rd morning, Elias heard a soft sound. He kept his eyes closed and yawned again. A wet, cold nose gently touched his hand. Max had finally crawled out of the dark hole. The dog was still shaking, but he chose to trust the silent man. Max slowly rested his heavy head on Elias's leg. Elias gently touched the dog's soft ears. It was a beautiful moment of pure healing. They started working together every day. Elias noticed something amazing about Max. The dog had an incredible, natural talent for smelling things. Elias hid small objects in the deep forest. He never commanded Max to find them. He never forced the dog to work. Max searched for the items because he wanted to make Elias happy. Max worked out of pure love, not out of fear or strict obedience. When a dog works for love, its senses become twice as powerful. Max could track a tiny scent through rain and heavy mud. He was faster and smarter than any regular police dog. Elias had successfully rebuilt a broken soldier into a silent, perfect guardian. They lived happily in their quiet world for a full year. Elias thought he had left his old, painful life behind forever. But the universe has a strange way of bringing the past back to life. A dark emergency was about to hit the city. Elias turned on his old police radio one evening. A frantic voice was speaking. The city was in total panic. A terrible crime had just happened, and the police were completely failing. The quiet guardian was needed once again in the dangerous, dark forest. Elias listened closely to his small police radio. The news reporter sounded completely terrified. Chloe, the 80-year-old daughter of the city mayor, was missing. The kidnappers took her deep into the dangerous Blackwood forest. A massive, violent storm was quickly approaching the dark woods. The radio announced that Captain Jax was leading the official search team. Jax brought his elite K9 unit into the forest, followed by television cameras. He wanted to look like a brave hero on the evening news. But the weather was becoming incredibly dangerous and wild. A loud crack of thunder shook the sky. Heavy rain started falling. On the radio, Elias heard police officers shouting in panic. Jax's highly trained police dogs were stopping. The loud thunder terrified them. They refused to walk any further into the dark, wet forest. Instead of using calming signals, Jax became very angry. He cared more about the television cameras than his animals. He pulled out a black remote control. He pressed a button to send a painful electric shock to the dog's collars. He tried to force them forward. The pain and fear completely broke the police dogs. They froze like stone statues. Their noses stopped working because their brains were paralyzed by extreme panic. They completely lost the little girl's scent. The official search mission was a total, embarrassing failure for Captain Jax. Elias looked out his cabin window. The storm was exactly like the one that terrified Max a year ago. Blackwood Forest was a deadly place in this weather. Elias knew he should stay inside. He looked at Max, who was watching the heavy rainfall. Max hated loud noises. He hated the thunder. Elias did not give a command. He did not put a leash on the dog. He simply looked into Max's brown eyes. Elias wondered if the broken soldier was brave enough to face his worst nightmare again. Max stared back at Elias. The dog slowly licked his lips. It was a calming signal, showing that he was thinking carefully. Then, Max turned around and walked to the door. He picked up Elias's heavy yellow rain jacket in his mouth and brought it over. Max dropped the jacket at Elias's feet. The dog let out a soft, determined bark. He was choosing to go into the dangerous storm. He was not forced by a painful electric collar. He was driven by an invisible bond of pure trust and love. Elias smiled proudly. He put on his yellow jacket and opened the cabin door. The cold wind howled loudly, blowing rain into their faces. The silent guardian and his brave dog stepped out into the dark forest. They were the little girl's only remaining hope. The forest was a dark, wet nightmare. Thick mud grabbed at their feet. The wind screamed through the tall trees like an angry ghost. Max kept his nose close to the wet ground. Rain usually washes away scents, but Max's incredible nose was tracking a miracle. They walked for 2 hours in the freezing rain. Suddenly, a massive flash of lightning hit the ground nearby. A giant, burning tree branch crashed down right in front of them. The loud explosion shook the earth. It sounded exactly like a deadly war bomb. Max stopped immediately. His ears dropped flat against his head. His body began to shake violently. The terrible phantom trauma was returning to his mind. The brave dog was ready to turn around and run away in pure, blind panic. The fear was too strong. Elias did not pull the leash. He did not shout any strict commands. He remembered the rules of Paw Logic. Elias completely stopped walking. He crouched down in the cold mud, turned his side to the dog, and breathed out a long, heavy sigh. Elias was giving Max the ultimate power of choice. He showed the dog that they were safe, but he would not force him forward. Max looked at the burning tree, and then he looked at Elias's calm, peaceful face. The dog paused for 10 seconds. Then, Max did something amazing. He stood up tall and violently shook his entire body, starting from his head to his tail. In dog psychology, this is called a stress shake. It is how a dog physically throws away its anxiety. Max had defeated his panic. Max walked around the burning tree and put his nose back to the ground. He pulled Elias deeper into the dark woods. A few minutes later, Max stopped and dug into the mud. He pulled out a small, pink hair ribbon. It belonged to Chloe. Elias picked up the pink ribbon. They were on the right path. But as Elias looked closely at the mud, he saw something else shining in the dirt. He reached down and picked up a small, heavy metal button with a broken black thread. Elias rubbed the mud off the button. His heart stopped beating for a second. It was a shiny gold button with a special police star. It was a custom button used only on the uniform of a high-ranking police captain. It did not belong to normal kidnappers. A cold feeling washed over Elias that was worse than the freezing rain. This kidnapping was not a random crime. It was a carefully planned trap. The dark truth was hiding somewhere in this deadly forest, and Elias was walking straight into the devil's mouth. Max led Elias to a small, abandoned hunting cabin hidden deep in the forest. The wooden roof was broken, and the windows were completely dark. Elias signaled Max to stay quiet. They moved silently through the heavy rain toward the old, wooden door. Elias gently pushed the door open. He turned on his small flashlight. The light revealed a terrible, bloody scene. Two dangerous-looking men were lying dead on the dirty floor. They had been shot perfectly from a very close distance. They were the hired kidnappers. Elias quickly searched the small cabin. He looked under the broken beds and inside the old closets. Chloe was not there. The little girl had somehow escaped into the storm. Suddenly, Max let out a very low, dangerous growl. The dog stared at the open door. From the dark, rainy shadows, a tall man stepped into the cabin. He was holding a black gun with a long, metal silencer. The man smiled a cold, evil smile. It was Captain Jax. He looked perfectly calm in the middle of the bloody crime scene. The horrible, twisted truth finally made perfect sense. Jax had secretly hired these two criminals to kidnap the mayor's daughter. He wanted to create a massive, terrifying crisis for the city. Then he planned to personally rescue the girl and become a famous, beloved hero. Jax wanted the mayor to make him the new police chief. He came to this cabin to kill his hired criminals so they could never tell the truth. He planned to walk out of the forest, holding the little girl in his arms for the cameras. But the violent storm had ruined his perfect plan. Chloe had escaped the cabin before he arrived. Now, Jax had a terrible new goal. If Chloe survived and told the police that her kidnappers knew Captain Jax, his entire career would be completely destroyed. "I have to find that little girl, Elias," Jax said softly, pointing his gun at his old partner. "She knows too much now. She cannot leave this forest alive. I have to silence her forever to protect my reputation and my future as police chief." Elias felt a burning rage in his soul. His former best friend was a cold-blooded monster. Jax was willing to murder an innocent 80-year-old child just to get a promotion. Elias knew he could not let this evil man take another step into the woods. "You are not a police officer, Jax," Elias said with disgust. "You are just a pathetic, greedy killer." Jax laughed and slowly raised his gun. "Goodbye, Elias. You should have stayed in your quiet cabin." Jax pulled the trigger, sending a silent bullet flying forward. Elias saw Jax's finger move. He instantly threw his body to the side. The silent bullet missed his chest and hit the wooden wall. "Go, Max!" Elias shouted loudly. The man and the dog crashed through the side window, falling out into the wet, freezing mud. They rolled quickly down a steep, slippery hill. They landed in a deep, rocky ravine hidden by thick bushes. Elias held his breath. He knew they could not fight a man with a gun in an open area. They had to use the dark forest to survive. Jax stood at the top of the hill. He did not chase them down into the dangerous mud. Instead, Jax smiled cruelly. He put 2 fingers into his mouth and whistled very loudly. The sharp sound cut clearly through the heavy noise of the storm. From the dark trees above, a large, powerful animal leaped out. It was Titan. Jax had brought Elias's old Canine partner into the forest. Titan looked wet, confused, and very stressed. Jax pointed his finger down into the dark ravine where Elias was hiding. "Kill him, Titan. Get him!" Jax shouted aggressively. Titan obeyed the command and ran down the steep hill. He used his amazing nose to track the scent. In less than a minute, Titan found Elias and Max hiding behind a large, fallen tree in the mud. Titan bared his sharp teeth, ready to attack the target. But then, Titan stopped completely. He smelled a familiar, deeply loved scent. Titan's angry eyes softened. He recognized Elias. The dog dropped his ears and began to wag his tail with pure, happy joy. Titan whined softly and tried to walk toward his old master. He wanted to be hugged. Elias felt tears in his eyes. But up on the hill, Jax saw the dog stop. Jax pulled out the black remote control for Titan's heavy electric shock collar. Jax pushed the button hard. A bright spark flashed on Titan's neck. The dog screamed in terrible, unnatural pain. Titan fell to the ground, shaking. Jax pressed the button again and again. He was torturing the poor animal to force him into a violent frenzy. The extreme pain completely broke Titan's mind. The dog forgot who Elias was. The electric shocks turned his brain into a panicked, defensive weapon. Titan stood up. His eyes were wide with blind terror and wild anger. He growled fiercely, foam dripping from his mouth. Driven totally mad by the pain, Titan leaped over the fallen tree. He was aiming directly for Elias's throat. A deadly fight between 2 police dogs was about to happen. Elias closed his eyes, unable to hurt his old, beloved friend. The nightmare was absolute. Titan flew through the air, ready to bite. Suddenly, Max jumped forward. But Max did not attack or bite the crazy dog. Instead, Max used the brilliant magic of Paw Logic. He landed in front of Titan and immediately turned his head completely away. Max began to walk in a slow, wide curve around Titan. He licked his lips continuously and blinked his eyes very slowly. These were the most powerful calming signals in the animal world. Max was silently screaming, "I am not your enemy. Please calm down." Titan was completely confused. His brain was full of aggressive commands and electric pain. But another dog was offering him pure, absolute peace. The ancient language of dogs fought against the modern torture device. Titan stopped his attack. He stood still, breathing heavily and watching Max. Max continued to offer calm, peaceful energy. The invisible wall of safety washed over Titan's panicked mind. Suddenly, Titan snapped out of his blind rage. The brave German shepherd turned his head and angrily bit down on the painful electronic box attached to his own collar. Titan's strong teeth crushed the plastic and wires. The collar broke and fell into the mud. He was finally free from the terrible pain. Jax ran down the hill, screaming in anger. He pointed his gun directly at Titan, ready to shoot the disobedient dog. Jax never saw Max moving in the shadows. Max used his silent military training. He crawled quickly through the thick mud, blending perfectly with the darkness. Before Jax could pull the trigger, Max leaped from the bushes and hit the evil man from behind. Max grabbed Jax's wrist with his strong jaws. He did not bite to kill. He bit to disarm. Jax screamed and dropped the black gun into the deep river. Max pushed the man face first into the cold mud and stood over him, growling a serious warning. Elias quickly ran forward and used Jax's own heavy metal handcuffs to tie him securely to a large tree. The corrupt captain was trapped. Elias looked at the two beautiful dogs standing together in the rain. They had saved each other without shedding any blood. Elias hugged both dogs tightly. Titan licked Elias's face, happy to be with his true master again. But the mission was not finished yet. Little Chloe was still lost in this terrible storm. Elias stood up, and the three of them began searching the woods again. With two expert canine noses working together in perfect harmony, they moved incredibly fast. The dogs tracked Chloe's scent to a deep, dark cave near the rising river. The water was rushing in quickly. They had to hurry before the cave completely flooded with cold water. Elias turned on his flashlight and entered the dark, wet cave. The flood water was rising very fast, covering his boots. Deep inside, sitting on a high rock, was little Chloe. She was freezing, wet, and crying loudly. She looked absolutely terrified of the dark shadows. Elias smiled warmly. "Chloe, I am a police officer. I am here to take you home to your father," he said gently. He reached his hand out to help her jump down from the rock. Chloe stopped crying and looked ready to jump into his arms. But then, Chloe saw Max and Titan standing behind Elias in the shadows. The little girl gasped in total panic. She squeezed herself against the cold cave wall and screamed, "No! Keep them away. I hate dogs. Please don't let them eat me," she cried hysterically. Elias realized Chloe suffered from cynophobia, a severe psychological fear of dogs. The rising floodwater was getting dangerously high. If they did not leave in 2 minutes, they would all drown. But Chloe refused to move if the dogs were near her. She chose the water. Elias could not carry her out while holding 2 large dogs. He needed a miracle. Max understood the human panic. The brilliant dog knew exactly what to do. Max did not need any commands. He turned around and walked exactly 5 meters away from the rock. Max lay down completely flat on the wet stone floor. He put his head between his paws. He closed his eyes tightly and breathed very softly. Titan watched Max and immediately copied the behavior. Both large, scary dogs became perfectly quiet and still like sleeping puppies. By making themselves small and closing their eyes, the dogs created a powerful zone of absolute safety. They removed all pressure and threat from the terrified little girl. They used Paw Logic to calm a human mind. Chloe watched the sleeping dogs in total surprise. "See? They are just sleeping," Elias whispered softly. "They will not hurt you." "But we have to go right now, Chloe." The little girl wiped her tears. She looked at the rising, dangerous water, and then she looked at the peaceful, quiet dogs. She felt safe. Chloe bravely stepped off the high rock. She walked carefully past the 2 dogs. Max and Titan did not move a single muscle. They kept their eyes closed until Chloe safely grabbed Elias's hand. Elias quickly picked her up and carried her out of the cave. As soon as they stepped out into the forest, the cave completely filled with rushing floodwater. Max and Titan followed them out perfectly. The incredible intelligence of the dogs had saved the girl's life. Now it was time to bring the real monster to justice. The morning sun finally broke through the dark clouds. Elias carried the sleeping girl out of the forest. Max and Titan walked proudly by his side. A massive group of police cars, reporters, and the mayor were waiting near the road. The crowd cheered wildly. The mayor cried and hugged his safe daughter. The police rescue team went into the forest and brought Jax back in handcuffs. Jax immediately started shouting at the news cameras. He pointed his finger at Elias, trying to sell his final, desperate lie to the world. "Elias is the kidnapper," Jax screamed loudly. "He planned this whole thing. I went into the forest to stop him, but he ambushed me and tied me to a tree. Arrest him right now." The police chief looked confused and slowly reached for his gun. Elias did not panic. He calmly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black police radio. He had secretly taken it from the dead kidnappers in the cabin. The radio had an automatic recording feature for all incoming calls. Elias pressed the play button. Jax's cruel voice echoed loudly from the small speaker for everyone to hear. "I have to find that little girl. Elias, I have to silence her forever to protect my reputation and my future as police chief." The entire crowd gasped in absolute, horrified shock. The audio evidence was perfect and undeniable. Jax's face turned completely pale. He felt his knees in the mud. The police chief immediately arrested Jax for kidnapping, murder, and deep corruption. The evil traitor would spend the rest of his miserable life in federal prison. The mayor shook Elias's hand with deep respect. The police chief apologized for believing Jax's lies. The chief held out a shiny new silver badge. "Elias, we want you back," the chief said. "We want to promote you to captain of the K9 unit immediately." The reporters flashed their cameras, waiting for Elias to take the shiny prize. Elias looked at the silver badge. Then, he looked down at Max and Titan sitting peacefully by his side. He realized that a piece of metal could never define a true hero's heart. "Keep the badge," Elias said softly, smiling at the surprised chief. "I don't need it anymore. I have a different job now." Elias turned his back on the bright cameras and the fame. He grabbed his old yellow jacket and walked away from the noisy crowd. Elias walked back toward the quiet forest with his two loyal best friends. He knew his true mission was not fighting criminals in the city. His destiny was to use the silent power of Paw Logic to heal broken souls, one gentle breath at a time.